Hey, what's up guys? In today's video, we're going to have a look at the gaming performance offered by the new M4 iPad Pro. Enjoy. Our first game to look at is Death Stranding by Kojima. Now this is a Metal 3 game with Metal FX temporal support on performance mode. Similar to other M series iPads and iPhone 15 Pro, the game has no custom graphical options on mobile. On this iPad, it targets 30 FPS, low settings, and a resolution of about 1080p, but Metal FX makes that a much lower resolution too. For the most part, on this iPad, it's a locked 30 FPS. However, it does have some frame pacing issues. My M2 iPad Pro didn't have these issues, but that machine did have 16GB of RAM, while this one only has about 8. I don't think that's the problem though. It might just be due to the fact that the game hasn't been updated for the M4 hardware. I don't really know, honestly. Hopefully in the future, Kojima can crank up the resolution with Metal FX on a higher setting and allow for 60 FPS. This iPad should be able to play well above these settings. In my 20 or so minutes of playing the game, it reached an outside surface temperature of 34.5 degrees. Next is Resident Evil 4 by Capcom. This is, again, a Metal 3 game with Metal FX spatial support. Just like Death Stranding, the game has no custom graphical options on mobile for all M series iPads and iPhone 15 Pro. On this iPad, it targets 30 FPS, low graphics, and a resolution of about 1118p. There really isn't much to say about the performance here because it's usually a locked 30 with amazing frame pacing. It's exactly the same performance that we saw on M2 iPad Pro. I could only find one scene in the game where it goes below 30 FPS, and this is fairly early on in the story. Plus, when sniping, the FPS would drop quite a bit, which is annoying. These two issues occur on all M series iPads, so it's not exclusive to this machine and not an example of the GPU power. Again, I hope Capcom allow this game to run at higher settings in the future on M4 hardware, as it really should be able to push 60 FPS at much higher settings. In my 12 or so minutes of playtime, the game reached an outside surface temperature of 33.6 degrees. Moving on, we have Capcom's Resident Evil Village. This is again a Metal 3 title with Metal FX support. Metal FX quality uses temporal upscaling, while performance uses spatial upscaling, which looks disgusting. First, here is the game running at 1324p balanced preset with a 60 FPS cap and Metal FX on quality. Look, it's not a locked 60 FPS, but it can hit that target quite often, even in very challenging scenes, and I think that's pretty damn impressive for this device that is so incredibly thin. At these settings, the game reached an outside surface temperature of 38.1 degrees for me. Next, here is the game running at 1324 prioritized performance preset with a variable FPS and Metal FX on performance. At these settings, the game reached an outside surface temperature of 48.5 degrees for me. Last, here is the game running at native resolution 1668p, prioritized graphics preset with a 30 FPS cap and Metal FX is off. It's important to enable 30 FPS to improve the frame pacing. This is actually my favorite way to play the game on my M4 iPad Pro. Metal FX sucks in this game, and I think 30 FPS is very playable for this title. It just looks gorgeous playing like this. Anyway, at these settings, the game reached an outside surface temperature of 37.6 degrees for me. Now, here is Divinity Original Sin 2 by Larian Studios and Warframe. This game has no custom graphical options on iPad. On this iPad, it targets 60 FPS, ultra graphics, and a resolution of 1920 by 1342. Warframe told me it's the same resolution as the 11-inch iPad Pros with M1 and M2. Unlike many other new AAA ports, this one comes to iPad with no sacrifices and no upscaling solution like Metal Effects or AMD FSR. It just looks gorgeous, even if it's an older title. On M1 and M2 iPads, it was usually 40 to 60 FPS, while on this M4 iPad Pro, it's usually stuck on 60. It still has some issues during combat sequences, but it's not nearly as bad on this device. I also like to stress test the GPU in this scene in particular. It will go below 30 FPS with all these on-screen effects, but the last M series iPads would go well below 20 in this scene. So for me, it's a big improvement. Anyway, in my 12 or so minutes of playtime, the game reached an outside surface temperature of 50 degrees. It was the hottest game on this list, body temperature-wise and sexy-wise. Early this year, Feral Interactive added Metal 3 support to Alien Isolation on the App Store to better support new Apple mobile hardware. They told me to stress that this shouldn't improve performance, but future-proof the game for upcoming hardware and operating systems. Isolation on the App Store contains 3 graphics presets: battery saver, graphics, and performance. We're just going to have a look at graphics and performance. Let's see how performance mode goes on this M4 iPad Pro. This mode targets 60 FPS on new devices, but at the cost of lower video settings. For me, it was mostly a locked 60 FPS. Sometimes it would drop a few frames during challenging scenes, such as using the flamethrower on the Xenomorph. In this mode for me, the game reached an outside surface temperature of 41.2 degrees. Now, here is graphics, which targets 30 FPS on most devices, but on new iPad Pros, it targets 40 FPS. Not much to talk about, as it's locked to this target. I actually prefer to play the game in this mode, as it targets near native resolution, and 40 FPS is a high enough FPS to enjoy this title. In this mode for me, the game reached an outside surface temperature of 35 degrees. Now it's time to look at War Mongrels, which most people don't even know is on iPad. This one is by Destructive Creations and Virtual Programming. The game has no custom graphical options on M series iPads, and it runs at a locked 30 FPS. Sadly, I could not get an answer from the developer. Virtual Programming, on what resolution or video settings it targets here. What they did tell me is that the game runs on Metal 2.1. Anyway, this port isn't perfect on any iPad that it supports. It has terrible frame pacing. Mouse support is completely broken here too, if you're wondering. I just hope Virtual Programming continue to work on the iPad version and improve the performance. Anyway, in my 12 or so minutes of playtime, the game reached an outside surface temperature of only 30.1 degrees. Myst by Cyan. In this video, I am playing Myst at epic settings. Cyan told me the game supports Metal 2.1 and AMD FSR 1.0 and uses 50% upscaling on all iPhone and iPads. In this instance, the game is only running at 1210 by 834 on this iPad Pro. A very low resolution, and it's noticeable here, especially with AMD FSR. The game also has a 120 FPS option in settings. However, based on my testing on ProMotion displays, it's still capped at 60 FPS. Hopefully this can be fixed in the future. Since the game is running at such a low resolution, the game absolutely flies here, mostly sticking to its 60 FPS target on my M4 iPad Pro. The only world it has a few issues on is the main island. For some reason, the refresh rate often goes down to 30 Hz for a few seconds. This often happens due to thermal throttling on mobile, where it would switch from 60 Hz to 30 Hz to save, the device in some circumstances, but this isn't really happening here because I played the game for about 45 minutes to unlock the main worlds, and in this time frame the game reached an outside surface temperature of only 36 degrees. It did not get hot at all. Even though this is a 2014 title, Wreckfest is a very demanding game. This is basically the current gen console version with improved textures and grass quality. In this video, I'm playing the game with all settings on their highest quality. It's worth noting, Handy Games told me when the game is set to extreme screen scaling, it targets 83% of native resolution. In this case, it's running at a resolution of 2008 by 1384. The game is usually well over 60 FPS, often above 100 FPS, which I think is amazing. Sometimes during massive crashes the game can drop to 60 FPS and a little below that, but this doesn't happen too often for me. What's interesting is that this is a Molten VK title, which I don't often hear of for iOS games. Anyway, in my 14 or so minutes of playtime, the game reached an outside surface temperature of 46 degrees, so a little hot. Next, here is Handy Games' other new release, Cosmic Shake. Here I am testing the game at ultra resolution, 120 FPS, and all advanced video settings are on ultra too. Handy Games told me, playing the game at ultra resolution, it should be roughly 75% of native resolution. But they said that's not 100% accurate because Apple uses the mobile content scale factor to convert something we cannot measure precisely. So they said it could be a few percent more everywhere, but not less in any case. I hope that makes sense. Really, there's not much else to say with this one, as it's always over 60 FPS and it just has no issues on this M4 machine. It would be nice in the future if ultra resolution could maybe target a higher scaling percentage like 85, but meh, not a big issue. Anyway, in my 12 or so minutes of playtime, the game reached an outside surface temperature of 44.8 degrees, which is pretty cool considering it's targeting 120 FPS. I know, San Andreas is a very old title, I know, but this is the new definitive edition with improved graphics. The major downside with these new GTA versions, GTA 3, Vice City, San Andreas, is that they're all capped at 30 FPS. You can enable some advanced settings like ground haze, bloom, and lens flare, but otherwise it's a very locked experience. I first tried the game at default settings. It's always 30 FPS, but the frame pacing is not great. It's similar to what we saw on Switch. Next, here is the game at 100% resolution, with all other settings on. The performance is, well, exactly the same. Not much else to say. Not great frame pacing. When playing at both these settings, the game reached an outside surface temperature of only 28.9 degrees. 28.9, that's awesome. I really hope Take-Two can add a 60 FPS option for these games in the future, because they would benefit greatly. NBA 2K24 Arcade Edition runs at native resolution on all iPhone and iPads, and it does here too, obviously. The game also runs at ultra high settings by default on this iPad. For me, it's for the most part a locked 60 FPS. I put the game in spectator mode for 13 minutes and it went below 60 FPS only once. Really good. It's worth noting gameplay here targets 60 FPS while camera shots target 30 FPS for this title, so when you're playing it might be going, why is the frame rate going down randomly? And that's why. Sorry, I forgot to look at the temperature for this one and I just can't be bothered going back and playing it. You might laugh at me for including Goat Simulator 3 in this video, but well, for me it's more demanding than people give it credit for. The game sadly has no custom graphical options on iPhone or iPad, and it really needs it. Coffee Stain told me, and this really confuses me, M series iPads and iPhone 15 Pro models run the game at 100% resolution, and the highest graphics? Really, the highest graphics? This honestly just baffles me because the game looks to be running at low settings, so yeah. The game looks considerably better on current gen consoles and PC. I love playing this game on my PS5. It looks awesome. And it only runs at 30 FPS on iPhone and iPad as well. The frame pacing is pretty awful here as well, and it kind of ruins the experience. The developer also told me the game runs on Metal 2.1, so maybe using Metal 3 might improve things. I'm sorry to be such a downer. They're probably going to see this video, but that's just my thoughts. I love you guys. I love your work. It's just the port I think could be a bit better. Anyway, in my 12 or so minutes of playtime, the game reached an outside surface temperature of only 28.1 degrees. This is Warframe. I'm very bad at this game. I don't really know what I'm doing. Anyway, I'm testing the game at 60 Hz, 100% resolution and max settings. It's sadly not a locked 60 FPS and often goes down to 40 FPS during big battle sequences on my M4 iPad Pro. Still, I'm pretty happy with it overall. The game launched on mobile in a terrible state, and the developer has really improved the overall performance and made the visuals look more on par with the console and PC version, especially on powerful mobile hardware. Anyway, in my 10 or so minutes of playtime, the game reached an outside surface temperature of only 30.8 degrees. Our last main game to look at is Hades. While Hades has no custom graphical options on iPhone or iPad, it doesn't really need it. It looks like it's running at the highest settings, and it's running at 60 FPS as well on everything. All the way back to an iPhone 8. The iPhone 8 runs this game at a locked 60 FPS, which is just really cool. Anyway, on this iPad, it's running at 1919 by 1323. If you're wondering, this game supports the Metal HUD. All you have to do is enable developer mode on your device and then enable the HUD in settings. So that's cool. During my playtime, this game only reached a max outside surface temperature of 29.1 degrees. I also, before we wrap things up, wanted to quickly go over some emulation on this device. So for this video I'm looking at PPSSPP, I'm sorry, I've never used this program and I don't know the correct pronunciation, but that's what it is. As we all know, emulators are now available on the App Store, and the PSP console probably offers the most demanding titles to look at in terms of emulation right now on this M4 iPad Pro, at least in my opinion. I might be wrong there. I don't often look at emulation on this channel, so forgive me. I don't really know what I'm doing. I tried 3 titles here: Tekken 6, Gran Turismo, and God of War, Chains of Olympus. Tekken 6 and Gran Turismo could easily play at 10 times rendering resolution with a locked 60 FPS, and both of them looked wonderful on my M4 iPad Pro. While God of War had a few minor issues, it could not play at 10 times resolution, or the FPS would tank and the audio became quite distorted. I had to put it to 7 times rendering resolution for it to mostly hit its 60 FPS target. Still, sometimes it would go a teensy bit below 60 FPS, but not a big issue. God of War did get a teensy bit hot at about 40 degrees for me, while the other games I tried were below 35 degrees, so really it's great all round, temperature-wise. So what are we thinking about the gaming performance of the M4 iPad Pro? Are you impressed or disappointed? For me,
Maybe you were trying to come up with a real question.
okay, thank you. For me, the iPad is one very good factor here is that it has very, very good thermal management. Almost none of the games went too far over 40 degrees, apart from Divinity Original Sin 2, which reached up to 50 degrees, and I think that is really, really amazing. So this leaves me very excited for the future of gaming on Apple mobile platforms, especially the upcoming iPhone 16 Pro. The issue that I have with this iPad Pro, or any iPad for that matter, or even iPhone, is that there's just not many big AAA games to try. There's just not much out there at all. So it's hard to recommend this device for gaming. The hardware is absolutely fantastic. It's held back by having not many games, and that the software isn't always there for gaming. And a lot of these titles are locked behind 30 FPS or locked graphics that you can't change, and they could actually run so much better here. In terms of emulation, this machine absolutely rocks it. But to be fair, many iPhone and iPads years ago can run emulators very well. So don't go out and get this device if you want to play emulators on it, because you can have a fun time on many older things out there. I would have also liked to have tested more games, but the software I use, TR-Drop, just takes so long to analyze performance. Oh my gosh, it's so long. One day I hope I can get the Metal HUD working for more games, but at the moment, that's just not in the pipeline, or yeah. Anyway, thanks for watching. My name's Stewie, and see you later.